It's almost the 1st of May. The growing season has barely begun, and already I'm feeling behind. I'm about a week behind on my seed sowing schedule right now. There's a lot of admin tasks that I keep procrastinating on, and the wet spring weather that we've been experiencing here in Michigan, well, it's really prevented us from being able to do things like prepare our flower beds and plant out our hardy annuals, things that we'd normally have done by now. And I know that I'm not alone. In fact, I'm pretty sure that a lot of flower growers can relate to that feeling of overwhelm. You know, right now it's easy to get caught up in the excitement that comes with a new season. A lot of us were excited to get our hands in the dirt and to start growing flowers. But the one thing that no one ever talks about is the burnout that happens, especially at the end of September, early October, as we get closer to that first frost date. As a fourth-year flower grower myself, I know the cycle well enough that I know that as we progress later into the season, it's so easy to feel more tired and more overwhelmed as the tasks as they just start piling on top of one another. And so today I wanted to give you my best tips for how to avoid that feeling of burnout so that you actually make it through the entire flower season having enjoyed the experience. Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. So here in West Michigan, we're still a few weeks out from our last frost date, and I am eagerly waiting for when it's officially go time. Now, if you're like me, you've likely spent the last few weeks or maybe even months preparing plans for the season ahead. You've done the hard work of deciding on what you're going to grow, how much of it you're going to plant out into your garden. You may have even calculated some estimated flowering dates that you can prepare customers for when you'll have flowers available to sell. If you're new to flower farming, it may feel like the hard work is behind you, and all that's left to do is to execute on the plan that you've created. But let me tell you, even with the best laid plans, it is normal to get off track at some point in the season. Maybe you overcommit, or you overestimate what you're able to accomplish. Maybe Mother Nature, maybe she throws a wrench in your plans, or you just get tired. There's a lot of reasons why you may become forced to deviate from your original plan. And I think when this happens, I think it's common to feel frustrated. I mean, for a lot of us, I think that we assume, especially with flower farming, that it's going to be beautiful and relaxing. The absolute last thing that you expect to feel is stress. But the reality is that you're working with a perishable product. You're doing physical labor, which can be exhausting, and you're up against the unpredictability of Mother Nature. All of that, it can be a lot. So let me share with you what's helped me to overcome these challenges. I have 8 tips to help you avoid flower farmer burnout this year. So tip number 1 is to automate as much as you can. It's easy to lose sight during the flower season where our time is being spent, and it's easy to blame the big projects as reason for our burnout. What we often don't realize is that it's the small, repetitive chores that we do on a daily basis that consume a lot of our time and energy. Especially when those chores, are stacked on top of one another, they can really eat away at what you're able to accomplish in a day. Automating as many tasks as you can is an easy way to lighten your workload. Even now, when we are in the beginning stages of our growing season, I have all of my grow lights, they are all set on timers because it's one less thing that I need to spend mental energy on. I don't think about the lights coming on in the morning or having to be turned off at night. I actually control all my lights using an app on my phone. I set a schedule once and then don't think about it ever again. Other tasks that I automate that save me time and effort during our flower season is drip irrigation. I've mentioned before that the flowers in our field are watered by drip irrigation. I set the entire system up before I start planting, and once the flowers are in, all I have to do is turn on that water spigot and let the drip irrigation go to town. I don't waste time dragging hoses everywhere. I'm not moving sprinklers around or fussing with overhead watering. There's a lot of tools and resources available that can help you automate tasks so that you can free up time to be used elsewhere. I really encourage you to take some time before the season gets underway and brainstorm some tasks, even if they're small, that can help make flower farming more manageable for you. Moving on to tip number 2, it's to streamline your processes by batching your work as much as possible. We all know how inefficient it can be to jump from task to task to task. I really liked having a rhythm to my week where I can do large chunks of one task at a time. I can spend focused energy doing one thing rather than trying to accomplish a lot of things at once. So what this looks like for me is I like to dedicate certain days of the week to certain tasks. I might dedicate one day to weeding or general garden maintenance. I'll spend another full day fertilizing with compost tea. I'll use another day to harvest all the flowers, and then I'll wait till the next day to make all the bouquets that I need. Because I'm not jumping around from task to task, I feel like I'm able to accomplish more in less time. And even when I'm doing tasks like starting seeds early on in the season, I like to use, an assembly line method. I fill all my trays with soil before I start sowing seeds. Then I sow all the seeds of a certain variety before I move trays onto my grow shelves. Again, this just helps me be more efficient and more apt to stay on schedule, which is always the goal. Okay, now number 3 and number 4 go together in this 2-part tip, which goes like this. You need to keep an eye on the big goal that you've set for yourself, all the while taking small steps to get there. What I mean by this is that success is subjective, and it's so important that you have a clear understanding on the way that you're measuring the success of your flower season. Is your goal to sell a certain number of bouquets? Are you trying to make a certain number of flowers survive in your garden? Are you putting yourself out there trying something new for the enjoyment of it? When we focus on what's our driving factor for the flower season, we give ourselves the opportunity to let everything else fall to the wayside. In some of my earlier seasons, I had this vision that my flower garden would be made up of these perfectly manicured rows of bright, blooming flowers. I remember feeling overwhelmed by the general upkeep that went along with that. But when I reminded myself that my goal was to be a profitable flower farm, it was to sell flowers. That was the moment that I realized that it was alright if my rows weren't perfectly straight or if there were weeds intermixed within my beds of flowers. I could still achieve my goal of harvesting bucket loads of flowers to sell to my community, even within the mess. After all, my garden was meant to be a working flower farm, not necessarily a Pinterest perfect photo op. Now, as I shared, this is a 2-part tip. In the second part, the part about taking small steps is equally as important. Big picture thinking helps us focus on what's important, but it can also leave us feeling a bit overwhelmed at how we're going to achieve such a big goal. We can feel frazzled, like we have to take big steps to reach that big end goal. And when we focus so much on the big picture, it can feel a bit insurmountable. And so this is your reminder to not get so caught up in the big picture that you lose sight of the actions that you can take today, every day, to move that needle forward. Maybe your goal is to sell 100 bouquets this season. Well, you don't have to sell those all at once. Break those big goals down into weekly milestones so that it can feel manageable. Moving on, let's talk about tip number 5, which is to simplify what you can. Believe it or not, you don't have to grow 50 different varieties of flowers to be a successful flower farmer. And I think that sometimes we don't choose a simple route because it feels boring to us. We'd rather chase the novelty of growing more and making the process more complex. But when we do that, we're really forcing ourselves to work harder. And so I want to encourage you to work smarter by keeping things as simple as you can, especially early on as you're trying to find your footing with everything that you're doing. As you gain experience and you find success with a few avenues, then it's easier to branch out into growing different varieties of flowers, or trying your hand at offering different seasonal offerings. That's really what we've done here at Two Sisters Flower Farm. I've mentioned before on our Instagram how this may be our 4th growing season, but it's our first year trying to grow ranunculus. I've always loved these flowers, and I knew that at some point I definitely wanted to grow them. But before this point, my time and my energy was spent trying to master the basics of flower farming. Now in this 4th year, I feel like it's the right time to try my hand at this new crop. And I think that's an important part of not feeling overwhelmed. Knowing how to limit yourself so that you're not feeling overrun by trying to do all these things at once. Now, tip number 6 on how not to feel burned out is to delegate. This one may feel harder to accomplish, especially if you're going at your flower farming adventure all alone. You sort of feel stuck and like it's up to you to do everything that needs to be done in relation to growing flowers. And I know too that it's hard to bring on help during the early years of flower farming because if you're like me, you just don't have the extra money to do so. My business, it started as a hobby, and even once I did officially turn my flower garden into a business, I had to keep everything as lean as possible because I just didn't have the money to pay myself a full-time income, let alone pay someone else to work for me. But working a full-time job, I worked and I actually still work as a dairy farmer, as well as working a full-time flower farming side hustle, it can be exhausting. So one of the ways that I've learned to delegate is to use my money to invest in resources that can do certain jobs in place of me. I'm not shy about admitting that I do order a lot of flower plugs in our flower season. I order plugs in the very beginning of my flower season for things that are either hard to germinate or for flowers that take a long time to grow, like is the case with Lisianthus. This frees up a lot of time so I'm not sowing those seeds myself. I'm not having to water trays of seeds or monitor their growth either. I also order flower plugs later in the season for hardy annuals that I want to plant in the fall to overwinter. I love overwintering flowers that can take the bit of cold. I think it's a great way to get a jump in the next season. But sowing these seeds myself means that I have to start planting seeds in July in order to have transplants ready to go in the garden by fall. July, it tends to already be a full month with a lot of work needing to be done on the farm. So rather than stress over finding the time to sow trays of seeds, again I order plugs. They arrive in early September, just in time for a fall planting. Another way that I free up time is by using weed block fabric. My first year growing flowers, I was hesitant to invest a chunk of money into landscape fabric, and I thought that I could keep up with the weeding myself. I quickly learned that while I wasn't necessarily paying with money for my weed-free garden, I was absolutely paying with my time. As our growing space has expanded over the years, I've learned that that's time that I can't afford to spend on something like weeding. My time is better spent focusing on money-producing tasks for our flower farm. Let's talk about tip number 7 on how to avoid flower farmer burnout. And that's to manage your expectations. I think we idealize this notion of doing things that we're passionate about. There's a lot of quotes out there that talk about how when you find your passion, you'll never work a day in your life. And I think that's an unrealistic viewpoint to take with you into the flower season. There's going to be days, weeks, heck, even months where you're uncomfortable, where you're tired and wanting to give up. And what I think we don't hear enough about is that these feelings are usually temporary. And sometimes you just have to endure the suck. You have to grit your teeth and push through. And I think sometimes just knowing that these days where you're not exactly thrilled about doing the work that needs to be done, knowing that they exist, it's helpful. When you come to terms that not every day is going to be exciting, it's easier to recognize your feelings as normal rather than a sign that you're doing something wrong. Okay, I have one last tip to share with you, but before I do me a favor. If you're finding the information within this video helpful, would you please give us a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button below? I mean, it really helps us out. Okay, last but not least, tip number 8 is to set boundaries around your workday. I know for me, growing flowers, it really started as a passion project. When that happens, it's easy to lose yourself in your work. And then when you're in the beginning of stages of building your business, you're so eager to just get to the point where you're bringing in money that you can easily go overboard putting in the long hours trying to speed up the process. The problem with this is that you don't get a break from your flower farm. Now there's definitely parts of our season where we do have to put in a lot of hours. You know, I have to work until the job's complete. But I found that during the majority of the year, when it's just normal everyday business stuff, that having boundaries that separate my work, my personal life, it helps to alleviate some of the stress, that burned out feeling. When I'm able to separate work from play, I feel like I'm not always on the clock. I'm not always answering emails. I'm not always responsible to someone else. You know, I've even gone so far to set boundaries with social media. I tend not to post anymore on Sundays just because I need that break to really rest and feel recharged and ready to dive into work the following day or the week. Giving myself space within my day to feel like a normal person and to do tasks that either just need to be done, like, you know, laundry or dishes, or tasks that I enjoy, like spending time talking to friends or just watching TV. It's what ultimately gives me the energy I need to be more effective when I'm actually working within the flower farm itself. Now, before the season gets super busy, it might be the perfect time to lay some ground rules with how flower farming will fit within your life. Maybe you want to commit to not working after a certain time of the day, or you want to be able to take certain days off altogether. Whatever it is, set the boundary now, and you'll be more likely to follow through with it when the time comes. Well, there you have it, 8 tips on how to avoid burnout this flower season. I hope that you found this video helpful, and I truly wish nothing but an enjoyable flower season for you this year. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye guys.